there really is a question here. It's not that the web is the default winner and it's just a matter of time. There's really a question whether for the short term or the long term you should invest in web or app for the experiences that you're developing. But that's sort of confusing because there's actually two issues here in one, right? There's whether you want to use the web as a delivery platform or whether you want to use the web as an experience platform. And we'll talk more about this as the presentation goes on, as the course goes on. But what we really mean here is that you can use the web to deliver experiences to people through the browser. And there are people who are advocating that that's all you really need to do in mobile. And there are people who are advocating that you use the web as like a cross-platform GUI toolkit, right? As like a way to replace native entirely, and you can use web technologies to create apps and app interfaces that sort of fool consumers into thinking they actually have an app, but it's really web. And so those are two different strategies that different people are advocating in mobile, and we're going to take a look at each one. So let's get started and talk about the delivery platform. Some people really think you can just use the web as your sole strategy in mobile because the web has such reach. And traditionally, Dion, the web has had this reputation, right, as like sort of the reach platform and like the platform you use when you want to target massive audiences. And so it's really been sort of breathtaking to us to realize as we look at the data that apps have a bigger audience than the entire internet right now. This is one data set that we've seen. This is about a year old now, where apps are red and the internet is green. And a year ago, apps had a larger audience than the internet did. And the blue line is TV. It's also fascinating to see that app audiences are bigger than TV audiences, right? And it's only gotten bigger. In fact, another data set shows that over time, engagement with apps has increased and surpassed web engagement. And that's kind of breathtaking, isn't it?
I know. It's great to see the numbers because I think a lot of people kind of do the logic of, well, web is more than iOS. And so by definition, it's bigger, right?
Yeah.
But it's like it's not the zero-sum game. It's not like when they're on iOS, they're just on the web.
Yeah.
But I think there's like a natural feeling of just like, well, obviously the web's on everything, so it's got to be better than doing anything else.
Yeah, yeah. And then you got some interesting examples, like the case of Angry Birds, where, oh my gosh, like this thing is huge, right? 2 years old, 500 million downloads, and this was as of a year ago, right? And when you put that in perspective, the most popular video game franchise, Mario Brothers, only sold around 430 million. And I mean, that's breathtaking, the reach that apps give you.
Yeah, and I think it's also fascinating to think about, what's changed in software in general through this one. Like Mario, I remember as a kid wanting to get Mario games for my console, and it was real money, right? Like $40 or whatever.
It is real money. I just bought another copy of New Super Mario Brothers Wii because we scratched the disc on the old one.
Exactly. Whereas Angry Birds is $1.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's been fascinating to see the App Store kind of push
or
the
free
prices.
if you're on Android.
Oh yeah, push the prices down. And allowing the developer to use scale to be able to still do very well, but the unit price has just totally changed.
As you were talking, it also sort of made me realize that you look at the statistic here, 130 million monthly active users, and it's fantastic that apps actually give you that sort of insight. Like, how many people in the marketing department or the user research department of Atari or of Nintendo would kill to know that statistic for earlier generations? I don't know if the Wii actually sends that heartbeat back, but I've never seen anyone produce that sort of statistic for any kind of console. But the apps, it's commonplace to have that kind of metric. And then you look at Draw Something. I mean, this monster was app-powered. It got its usage through apps and the distribution of the apps all over the place. And it's crazy to see how popular it got over such a brief period of time. I mean, do you remember that? In 9 days, they hit 1 million users. It was a phenomenon.
That's insane. Like, does this show that because it's so easy to kind of virally get into this world, especially because they use social networks to kind of push this to everyone, that is this going to also show up as fads where like the harder they rise, the harder they fall?
So speaking of that, Andrew Mason, before he was a billionaire, was a friend of mine. I haven't talked to him since he became...
Who's Andrew Mason?
The CEO of Groupon. Yeah, I haven't talked to him since he became rich and famous as much. But, in his early interviews, when people would ask him about like Groupon, how did Groupon get so big? He attributed Twitter. He said, you know what, we were one of the first companies to take advantage of Twitter, and there will be other companies like this one that get massive super quickly because of how connected people are and because of Twitter. I thought that was incredibly insightful, and I think Draw Something sort of illustrates that it's Twitter and Facebook, but that those social networks are a tremendous engine that leads to this stuff. And so you look at the success that apps are having, and you see this interesting trend that seems to be increasing where startups will just ignore the web entirely. And this blows my mind, Dion, because it wasn't but a few years ago that the web was the software startup platform. There was no other one. Like, you didn't hear about exciting startups that had written .NET Windows applications. You know what I mean? Like, the web was it. And Path is another one, this social network that's just sort of walked away from the web and said, you know what? We don't need to have a web experience. And they have like a destination page for links, but the experience isn't on the web. It's only native. And so you realize pretty quickly that the web isn't the reach platform that it used to be, in the sense that it's the way that you get the biggest audiences. The web is the reach platform in the sense that you can get to devices that, pardon my candor, no one really cares about anymore. that you wouldn't really develop an app for unless you're targeting a very specialized market. And so, yeah, the web is reach in that sense, but to get big audiences, you don't need the web anymore.
Yeah, and I think even in that sense, there's a lot of flawed logic, right? Like, how many business guys you talk to, or even architects, quote unquote, are just like, oh, this is great, we can build it once, and it'll work across all of these guys. When how many Windows Phone friends, if I hadn't many friends that actually used it, but I know a few. And like, oh man, it's so frustrating to go to a website that's it's just optimized for mobile Safari, and basically it's just optimized for WebKit.
Yeah.
So you don't just get it all for free with the web.
Yeah, no, that's true.